and reality in general. I wrote a paper recently on disclosure. It may or may not get published. I don't know, but it has to go through the agency first. But and I talk about this concept. And for me, UAP and the phenomena, I I don't care too much about the nuts and bolts of it because, let's say we have downcraft. I have it on good authority that we do, anywhere from 9 to 20. Uh, and let's say we don't understand it at all. I mean, we've been looking at this thing forever. We can't figure it out, right? And the technology might be 30th century technology as far as we're concerned. But let's say we had a communications with non-human intelligence, some species. And let's say we looked, we listened to them, heard them, and maybe they explained a little bit about what they can do. I mean, and what they have done. We could see now. I mean, the technology is just absolutely incredible. They can appear, disappear. It looks like they're able to manipulate energy and or possibly space time. Is Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis talked about this in the Age of Disclosure. And I think that's the common theory right now that's going on in the government about what they think about UAP. It is highly, highly complex and very, very strange. But what does that actually mean? Well, if you look at, I mean, I talked to somebody once and I asked them, and I said, well, where do you go to study this? I mean, do you go to an experimental physicist? Do you go to a theoretical physicist? Do you go to an engineer? And the answer is you probably go to all of them, but you also go to a psychologist, and you also go to religious scholars, and you also go to social scientists because all of these disciplines, they're racked up on top of one. They're all involved in this, and there's no way you can escape that. So if you're looking at this, and I mentioned this in the podcast a few times, we're all used to living in this universe, this reality. It's a consensus reality. A consensus reality based on our sensory package that we're all born with, which is highly limited. And so we're seeing things. I know, I had a friend of mine who was a younger guy, and he was all disillusioned about this and that, questioning life in general. And I said, you're looking at reality, or you're looking at your life through a very closed lens. I said, you don't you don't hear everything you should hear, see everything you hear, you don't sense anything. There's a lot more out there that you can experience. It just is. It's just a lot more out there. And so you're not really getting, your interpretation of what reality is really based on a limited number of facts. So, you have to sort of sit back and go, just live the life that you know, and and do the best you can with it, and what have you, and try to study. But what happens if you look at this and you say, oh, let me get back to what I was talking about. I asked the scientist, where would I look, and he said, if you drew a Venn diagram, the little circle in the middle should be consciousness and maybe quantum mechanics. That's probably where all this lies. I mean, Max Planck, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, said in 1931 something to the effect that um, matter is derivative from consciousness. He's convinced of that. He said it's all consciousness, and essentially what we're looking at, what we see, is illusory to a certain extent. I mean, if you're a quantum physicist, are we all spinning masses of energy, right? And if that's the case, that's our true being, true nature. Dig deeper into that and look even closer into that, and you end up being pretty much nothing. If the space between atoms is just, infinite or close to infinite, and electrons and what have you, I mean, what are we really? Are we just spiritual beings, or are we just parts of, a non-local consciousness that somehow or other incarnated into these physical beings that we are today for a particular reason nobody knows about. So this is what concerns me, and this is what's sort of frightening and also fascinating at the same time, because I think UAP and the phenomenon at its most basic level questions makes you question the nature of reality itself, and that what we view as our fixed reality may not be fixed at all. It may be something totally different. And as I mentioned this before, and not readily digestible. It is not something that most people would be ready to take on. We have been living in this medieval view. Our life is this, they call it the great chain of being back in the Middle Ages. There's God, angels, man, and you go down the list. But that's sort of how we see ourselves, even to this day, even after Newton and everybody else, we still, most people see themselves that way. But what if we're not number three? What if we're like number five on that list? What if free will doesn't really exist? What if, I know some of your people out there might be familiar with Charles Fort, probably the granddaddy of all this, of anomalous behaviors. And I mean, he said, after studying this for many, many, many years, he thought we were property. He thought we belonged to some non-human intelligence, that's able to do things to us at their will. And and you certainly do see instances of that if you read the literature, the UAP literature, and I've read almost everything that's out there. When you talk to contactees, and I get people writing me all the time about their experiences, you it's these people are normal people, and yet they're having these incredibly earth-shattering changes to their lives. And you can interpret it, some people interpret it as a good thing. Well, they've reached a theophany or some kind of catharsis, and now they're more spiritual beings. They've learned, that reality is, much, much greater than that, and we're actually spiritual beings. You can take it that way. But then there are people who have the exact opposite one. Now, granted, maybe like 10, 20% of the experiences have not a very good experience with this. And they don't react well to it. And this goes back to what I said earlier about being grounded when you want to get into this. Because once you get into this, you really quickly go to this area here. Well, what the hell does this mean for us? Um, don't know. I mean, is there advanced technology commensurate with their advanced spiritual development or development of their own consciousness? I mean, if they're able to manipulate reality, which we've seen time and time again, what does that what does that mean for us? And the answer is, I don't know. And if you want to have disclosure, how the hell are you going to do that? How are you going to come out and say uh, we have met with NHI or we have craft? We're not alone in the universe, and you want to limit that, and you don't want to tell them. Maybe you don't want to tell them anymore, but maybe you don't know anymore. Maybe you have absolutely no other information. Well, now you have this huge meatball that's hanging out there, right? And it's like, well, people are going, oh, what the hell? You're going to leave me with this? What the hell does this mean? So people are running to their synagogue, they're running to their church, they're running to mosques, and they're saying, help me with this. How does this fit into, this new cosmology fit into my religion or my social construct or my cultural construct? What does it mean for me? Where does that put me? How do I fit in, in a place where I thought I knew my place and now I don't know my place at all. It's completely up in the air. It's a very, very dangerous thing to do. And then you look at children. The hell do you tell an 8-year-old? Particularly if this comes out, I mean, what do you tell him when he comes up to you and he said, "Are they going to come get me?" Well, maybe not. Oh, they're not going to come get you. But yeah, he hears all these people or he sees all these people talking about it, and everybody's going to fill in that narrative from some crazy ass, Alex Jones to, well-meaning people talking about space brothers, and you would have these maybe 1,000 different narratives. All the contactees would come out, To the Stars would have to come out, Soul Foundation, SCU, MUFON. I mean, really credible organizations, but they would come out and they would try to say, "Hey, wait a minute, let's be realistic here. Let's look at this." But once it's out, it's out. So I know the government has spent time thinking about that, and this is probably the reason why it hasn't come out. Maybe they know something they don't want to come out because they're afraid it would be so problematic. Then again, maybe they don't know anything. Maybe they really don't know anything. Maybe there's a nothing burger there. They have the downcraft, they have alien bodies, maybe they had conversations, but there's no information beyond that. I mean, they can't extrapolate. I mean, people always said to me, well, they're hiding, these great energy successes, and we'll be able to take all this new technology, and they're hoarding it. Well, you're seeing a great example of asymmetric warfare going on right now in Ukraine, and you're seeing it in Iran. What happens if you take a technology that's free to everybody, a technology that you can use to create a weapon, any kind of weapon, a weapon that's extremely lethal, and everybody has the capacity to make that weapon? From a group of DIYers, sitting in an engineering lab at MIT, decide they want to use this technology to create something really great, and then you have somebody else, some crazy cult who decides they want to wipe out something. And bad people exist in the world, and you have to plan for that. So I mean, there are so many different things you have to look at when you look at disclosure, and when you look at this whole concept of UAP and the phenomenon. It's just more than oh, these people are here, or the NHI is here to help us. We have no clue why the hell they're here. We have no clue why they're coming. They say two things, sometimes three. First thing is, quit screwing around with nuclear weapons. Second thing they say is, um, uh, quit screwing around with the planet, with the climate. And the third thing they say is, well, we're part of a hybrid program, and we're looking at you, and we're trying to hybridize, humans, so we will be able to communicate better and all this kind of crap. But the fact of the matter is, UAP and these NHI lie through their teeth constantly. They're deceitful. I mean, that is a leitmotif that runs through this topic for the last 80 years. And I've had people tell me that, very credible people tell me they're in touch with, their alien brothers who'll say, oh, we're going to land on, in the United Nations on such and such a date, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And I always tell them, bullshit, ain't going to happen. Not going to happen. It's apocalypticism. It's millenarialism. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. But it's common, and it's common with religious cosmologies, and it's common in religion in general. People predicting things, and these entities tend to do that. They tend to come to people and say things like that, and the people believe them. But it's never true most of the time. Sometimes things do happen. And they are true, but most of the time they do not. That is an extraordinarily long-winded answer to and probably to a question that was much more specific than what I was going for. So sorry.